So basically, what I did is I installed three 8mm studs onto like the bottom side of the turbo setup, and then once you do that, you're basically ready to install the front down pipe for the turbo. So you basically set its tight clearance, which I could believe. So we might have to move this out of the way to get the turbo in, the downpipe in. There you go. Oof. All right, that fits. So first things first, put the gasket on. I think it's like this. This guy on. Okay. What? Well, feels like one of the threads don't want to go in. Alright guys, so I'm working on installing this, and it's kind of a pain in the ass, to be honest. There's not a lot of clearance, and what I've found is that if you use, at least for the 3 studs, if you use this 12mm crow's foot that they supplied with a swivel attachment to an extension, I think it's a better, maybe not even with the extension, let me see. It might be like you just need that swivel in there to give you that. So basically, I'm just gonna kind of summarize it and show you how it looks like after installed. So basically, this is the rear down pipe. Basically, you install two. It's gonna be kind of hard to see, but you install two studs on the bottom, and which then you use the Nord washers and nuts to secure that side, and then you use 3 Nord washers and 3 bolts on the top side to secure it to the turbo. So you basically put the 2 studs in, install the gasket, and then after that you put the nuts on, secure it. Again, this one I had to adjust some of the holes with the Dremel to allow it to work. It was very minor, but still a little bit of adjustment that I had to do to get this to sit properly. So once that's done, you could basically grab the second piece of the rear down pipe, which is attached by this V-clamp. Basically what I found was if you kind of loosely assemble it, this pipe obviously this pipe here, gravity kind of pulls it down a little, so you have to kind of push it up while you're tightening the V-clamp to get it to sit properly. If not, it ends up sitting like on this metal piece, which I'm assuming you don't want. So basically you just got to make sure it's actually aligned properly before you really start tightening it, or else it'll be sitting on the frame piece. So that's kind of the gist of it. I did leave this loose because to install some of the stuff later on, I feel like it's actually better to remove it to give you more clearance. But at this point in time, I tossed it back on because there's really no need for me to take it off anymore. So yeah, that basically summarizes the part about the rear down pipe that I didn't get to record. Alright, well, I ran out of some batteries. I grabbed my other GoPro, but this one is a little better quality, but either way, I guess I finished doing the turbo and the down pipes yesterday. I basically told you to use a V-clamp to install this one, but then I realized I don't know why they don't tell you to do this earlier in the process. Maybe because that nut would be difficult to get to, but this hose is a pain in the ass to get to. You're supposed to tighten that fitting in this little area, and yeah, as you can see, it's very tight. So basically what I did is I started on this side. If you reach around from the back, you might be able to get a finger on it to turn it and start it, and then you can basically put a wrench from the back side and turn it little by little to tighten it. Once that's done, move on to this side to do this this fitting, and then you get that in, and then I'll throw the down pipe back on later on. If there's anything else I have to do in this area, I'd rather not have it in the way. But that would be my only change on the whole setup, is maybe do this pipe later when you're actually really done putting all the hoses and stuff to this turbo. Alright, so basically I did the front oil feed line. Again, this one's a little easier, at least to do it compared to the rear. Basically I just started with this fitting and just turned the whole hose to help thread it in. Like it's very hard to get it to turn relative to the hose, because if you have it slightly skewed or tilted relative to the fitting, it doesn't really like turn. But if you just spin the whole hose, it like threads on as a solid fitting. So I did that, and then I did that afterwards, and I mean, looks as good as I think I can get it. There's really no pictures on how that's supposed to be set up, but I mean, the way I look at it, that's should be fine. Hey guys, so basically after the oil feed lines going to the turbo, the next part of the process basically tells you to start to basically fabricate the water lines and install them. So fabricating them isn't too bad. So basically I tried to the process pictures are kind of clear, but the main takeaway is don't just look at one page at a time. You actually have to jump over to the next page to see images related to what you're doing. So it's a pain in the butt to do these, but for the rear turbo, the top fitting goes up and over to the transmission area, and then the bottom fitting comes down over and then across over to the transmission area as well. It's kind of the opposite for the front turbo, and I'll show you that next. So the one thing I wanted to just show, obviously to tighten these fittings, it's actually not bad at all. All you gotta do is, like I've recommended, if you take this downpipe piece off, you can just from the back side reach over and tighten that nut or that banjo bolt, and then likewise you just put a ratchet wrench through here and turn it to be able to tighten that, and it's not that difficult to tighten in this configuration. And then if you wanted to, you could just throw in the oil drain lines from the turbo to the oil pan at this point as well, and that's pretty straightforward. The angled pieces are coming from the turbo, and the straight ends go to the oil pan. It's the opposite situation with the front turbo, at least from my assessment of it. And basically the description and pictures of the process says the top of the turbo, which to me would mean this guy, should be pointing towards the engine and going up towards the engine. But to be honest, I do not see any way that hose can go up and across without putting massive strain on the hose. Like, it would have to have a really tight bend to get to that position for you to bolt it down. But then later in the process, there's clearly a picture of the front turbo with this hose coming down and routing just like this. It's a little tighter actually, like it's kind of shown like that in their process. So there's a little contradiction there in regards to what it's saying in regards to what you should be doing. Picture shows one thing, description says the other. So I believe this is the correct way as Science for Speed does it. The description is just on their instruction, it's not very clear and doesn't match what their picture shows. So with that said, you kind of do the opposite. The one closest to the engine actually comes down over and goes over to the engine. The one furthest away goes up over and towards the transmission. And again, these are really difficult to get to. Well, this one's not difficult to get to. This guy is. What I found was before this oil drain hoses installed, you can get to it through putting a wrench in this region here and then tightening in this direction to get to the top of that banjo bolt. So basically I did that, installed the lines, and then I was a little concerned that, like, you know, hey, this is not as well placed, I guess, as, you know, or well defined where it should really be. So I wanted to make sure the water lines were gonna be good before I cut them. So I ended up doing like a dry fit. I took all the other tubings, put in the intake tubing. So you can see I actually don't have the intake installed, but I have the tubing, and I did like a dry install of all this stuff before I even cut the lines, just to make sure the lines aren't actually gonna cause a problem. So basically, I'll show you what I ended up doing with the water lines over the transmission next. Hey guys, so basically I'm gonna kind of talk you through what I did with the water lines. So if you look at the diagram for like a 91 to 94 model, it basically tells you that the inner portion of the turbos, like the side closest to the engine, should get the I would assume the incoming cooler water, and then the outside portion of the turbos should be getting the hotter return water that's going to the thermostat water passage. So I decided to do a little investigation though, because like the clocking of the turbos, like the inner part, isn't identical. Like for the front, I believe the incoming port is pointing down, while the one on the rear, I believe, is pointing up, or it's vice versa. And that kind of got me thinking, like, well, does the clock, like, does the orientation matter, and what, like, are those ports inlet outlet or outlet inlet? Like, what is the actual, you know, setup internally to the turbo for water passage? So I went into Garrett's website and looked into this, and apparently for thermal siphoning benefits, it's actually preferred that your cold water is coming in from the bottom port and the hot water is on the upper port. Internally, there is no like certain direction it has to go to. It's designed to go in either direction. So really, it's more of how your turbos are clocked determines where your lines are going. So with that said, I had kind of done all the routing as the process, and then I realized that this might not be ideal. So I pulled everything back out, and I then, you're probably noticing I have like blue and red tape. I basically made sure that the lines that were running to the top of the turbo orientation had red tape on the ends of them. It's just like electrical tape. And then the ones that are coming out from the bottom of the turbos, I had blue tape on the end of those hoses. Then I ran them to this area. Once I did that, I kind of, as I had explained in the other video, did a dry fit of all the other like components, like air filter, the piping for the charge pipes, just to make sure that like these lines, with the way I had them routed, were gonna be good. Once I verify that there's no interference or anything like that, I was comfortable enough to basically remark the hose where I think I want it, and then cut like a couple inches away from there, and that's where I basically put my T's in. And then with the remaining hose that you cut off, you can basically cut and form your next leg that goes to the engine. And again, I just marked those red. I think I'm gonna leave, well, red and blue. I think I will leave those on just for future reference, so I understand, like, if I ever have to take this apart, or if anyone else has to take it apart, they have a clear, like, oh, this is the hot water coming out of the turbos. This is the cold water coming into the turbos. It'll just be a little neater, I think, and helpful for future reference. So once I did that, I kind of cut everything as I predicted would be, you know, the good setup. And then I just kind of did a quick, I secured the two hoses here and secured the blue hose. There's like a bracket. It's kind of hard to see. There's like a bracket under the blue hose. Well, you'll just have to take my word. There's a bracket under the blue hose that I tie wrapped that, and now I feel like that's kind of rigid enough that even if, you know, the car is vibrating and stuff, it's not gonna move enough to cause damage to the hose itself or other components. So at least that's my plan, or what I was trying to do. And I probably spent like a good 2-3 hours just messing with these hoses and trying to make sure, like, there's no strain on them, there's nothing that could cut them. I changed the clocking of some of these clamps just so that the sharp edges are away from the hoses or electrical cables. So I feel like the way I have it set up right now, that's gonna work perfect. So basically that now leaves me to the next part, which is the final hookup to the engine. My plan is, at this point in time, I'm gonna remove all the what do you call it? I'm gonna remove all the cardboard and stuff that's currently under the car, and I'm basically going to try to, you know, make sure that if any of this stuff spills, it's not gonna basically damage anything. But I'm assuming there's coolant and water in these lines, so once I pop those off, it's gonna just start pouring. But yeah, that's good. Basically, that's the next course of action, is attaching these to the car, using these clamps to secure them in place, which is gonna be a challenge considering how tight it is in there. And then I think the water lines would be done, and the oil lines are in, and basically I can continue putting the charge pipes and continue on that way. So I'm gonna try to set up the camera and show you how I do this next part. So I think what we're gonna do is, this is gonna go here, but there's no reason why this blue hose can't just go to this, which leads to that port on the idle air control valve. So that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna cut this tie wrap, pull this back, route this over to about the length I want it with the proper loop that I want, and then I will just cut it, and I think that will work. Alright, so this, oh no, well, sprayed everything you wanted to spray. which is great. Got a little bit of coolant. Spray everywhere, huh? That really launched. I did not think it was gonna shoot out like that. But then again, that actually wasn't too bad in regards to the amount that sprayed out. So I cleaned up the mess I made by disconnecting this line from this hose. You know, I slid this on pretty good, so I'll be able to clamp that there. So next I gotta disconnect this guy, which again is probably gonna make a mess, and then reattach the red hose to it. I'm gonna get rid of these little clamps just because it's gonna make it hard for me to pull on these. Alright, hose is out. Now I can slide this guy on, and I should be able to clamp it. Alright, I'm not gonna go any tighter than that. Alright, so that should be the water lines run. And basically they're labeled, they're going to the idle control. So basically we just ended up putting the whole turbo system looping through this bypass here.